Hi, Mr. Fuji. So on the topic of the Israel-Hamas conflict, generally, what do you think about the situation?
David, thank you. That's a great question. And coming from a young person like you, that's important because, well, it's the future. And you being a young man, a young high school student, that's a valid question. And in 2 years, you will be voting, and that's important. And thank you for asking. Well, first of all, I'm running for Congress, and at the moment, unfortunately, in the state of California, as far as I know, I'm the only one talking about the Gaza genocide. Now, you have to remember, when I run for office, or public office, what I say has legal effect. So it's very important what I say. So the Gaza genocide is horrible. Children, mothers, fathers, entire families, schools destroyed. And I find that unacceptable. No, I do believe in safety and security, but I don't believe that one atrocity allows another person to commit another atrocity. And this is where I stand. I'm the only member of candidacy running for Congress that's advocating for a complete ceasefire for the safety and well-being for both Israel and the Palestinians in Gaza. And also, I have a dedicated website called www.gaza.school to help rebuild schools. Because there's nothing more important. I'm not important, David, you're important. The kids, our future, are what's important. So we have to have a plan to rebuild the schools in Gaza and stop this madness, stop this horrible genocide. And also, those that are benefited in Congress that allow this to happen cannot continue. I'm the only candidate in the United States that I know of that is requesting a congressional commission to investigate, to prove and prosecute members of Congress that benefited from the Gaza genocide. And this is really important because unfortunately it's been going on for 100 days and we have to put a complete end. It is unacceptable when children and families are targeted deliberately with intent to be deadly strikes by Israel. So I'm totally against the Gaza genocide. I'm for peace for both Palestinians and for Israel.
So I heard you talked about how congressmen or congresswomen, they benefit from the Gaza genocide. Could you please elaborate more on that idea?
Okay, great question. Well, unfortunately, there's a lot of money to be made in war. What I mean by that, we have investments in companies where we could invest in a company, say Tesla, for example, and then you make a profit, Tesla does good. Now, going back to that example, we have a lot of military companies where members of Congress literally know what's going to happen beforehand to invest and make a profit. If you and I did this, we call that insider trading. That's against the law, meaning they know what's going to happen before. They know that if they're going to pass a law to resupply the state of Israel with huge amounts of munitions and bombs, that eventually has to be replenished. So for example, I believe there's certain members of Congress that knew about this, that planned this, that also financially benefited from, say, outside sources like AIPAC, American Israeli Political Action Committee, J Street, to name a few, then profited while also supplying the weapons and tools and finances for the state of Israel to commit that genocide. So one, these members of Congress are financially benefited. Two, a lot of politicians in Congress benefited by the political support of such as AIPAC and J Street.
So, I know you mentioned about complete ceasefire and your website about building schools back in Gaza. So, once you become congressman, what solution do you think is best for the situation?
Well, first and foremost, my whole campaign is based on a new economic model I call peace, prosperity, and security. I really believe that is where we have to go because what it is, there's a huge disconnect in understanding of the world today that you live in, and the older people, my generation and older, they don't understand technology as much as you do. And it's frustrating. And we really have to have a complete ceasefire so it's safe to rebuild the schools. And two, we have to have a serious dialogue on what we call a two-state solution, a country for Palestinians, a country for Israelis. Now, with that said, we have to remember making enemies The estimated population of the Muslim world is estimated more or less to be around 1.8 billion people. I have never seen in my lifetime a unified consensus of 1.8 billion Muslims that overwhelmingly disagree with the Gaza genocide. And now that we are financially and militarily supplying and supporting the genocide, we have 1.8 billion people angry at the US that unnecessarily jeopardizes our brave women and men in our military, who I support. And because I'm the only anti-war candidate in the 51st Congressional District, this is a lot to take. But I will say I support our military by not involving them in unnecessary wars like Iraq, Afghanistan, Ukraine, and now the Gaza genocide. So we need a complete ceasefire so it's safe to rebuild schools as soon as possible to show goodwill. And I want to add one more thing. Prior to running, I created a petition on change.org that I thought I could get support from my fellow candidates, Sarah Jacobs, Stan Kaplan, and Bill Wells. In the United States Navy, we have something called a hospital ship. We have two of them, matter of fact. And what these hospital ships are is, well, it's a hospital. We have surgeons, we have nurses, and we have x-ray machines, we have vaccines, we have all this medical equipment on these two massive hospital ships. And they're purely intended to be, well, hospital ships. I made a petition for Sarah Jacobs, Bill Wells, and Stan Kaplan to help sign it to send on hospital ships to help the injured and elderly, the youth, the children, and the mothers who were killed or injured by our munitions in Gaza. And they were not signing. And that made me really mad. I said, that's not right. And that's one reason I'm running. So one reason is we got to rebuild the schools, send on hospital ships, and start rebuilding the goodwill of America, because America is a great country. But Democrat and Republican voters are not being served by the current politicians of Republicans and Democrats.
So I know you mentioned about like furthering the Americans' like goodwill.
Mm-hmm.
I remember Mike Johnson said a couple of like maybe like a week or two ago, he said that before like the Republicans and the GOP would support aid to like Hamas and stuff like that, they would first have to focus on like the southern border and kind of like protecting America first. Like,
Mm-hmm.
do you agree with that? Like, you know, focusing on America first and then focusing abroad?
Well, of course, every country needs a secure border, but here's the problem. Johnson also helped facilitate the Gaza genocide. So all the billions of dollars we're sending to Ukraine and now Israel, we could use for the border. So let's do it. But unfortunately, a lot of politicians are not being truthful. For example, the Ukraine war and also the Gaza genocide, we're spending a massive amount of money, material, that costs for our ships, our Navy ships to be there, it costs money. You know, there's a phrase I like to tell students: amateurs study strategy and strategy and tactics. Professional soldiers, we study logistics. Logistics is pretty boring, but it's pretty important, you know, and it costs so much money to do what we're doing. So we do need to secure the border, of course, in a humanitarian way, where it doesn't harm our binational relationship with Mexico, because it is a huge trading partner with us. And at the same time, stop this endless wars where we need to spend the money here, not just to secure the border, to make our schools better. You know, you as a young man, I would tell you as an educator, coming from the classroom, our high schools in San Diego are dilapidated, old, and horrible. And kids aren't even allowed to take the laptops home. This is, you know, kids are working with outdated equipment, really dilapidated school buildings. We need to do better. We have to do better. So let's spend the money here on our youth, on our schools, on after-school programs, and really invigorate our economy, because you, David, are the future workforce. And so it's important that you are adequately prepared for what we call the fourth industrial revolution. But for that to happen, we need to invest in Davids. We need to invest in our high school, middle school, elementary school kids.
So I know with the Houthis involved, and they're kind of backed by Iran with Hamas and like Hezbollah, I know many people have said that it's like Israel against Iran. Do you kind of agree with that?
Israel does have a long-standing problem with Iran. This is true. Now, what's going on with the Houthis is a very interesting question, David. I will say this. First, Hamas originally was funded and supported by the state of Israel. This is a fact. This is what they don't talk about in the news. The idea was Israel would want to split the two major political parties of the Palestinians, Fatah and then Hamas. And so the idea was, as long as the Palestinians would be fighting each other, they would never have a unified front for a Palestinian state. Now here comes Iran saying, hey, whoever they choose, we're going to support an independent state of Iran. Likewise, going back to the Houthis, this is a very interesting question because with all major religions, you have factions. You have Christians, evangelicals, Catholics, Protestants, Lutherans. But the Houthis, many of them being primarily Shia denomination, what I find fascinating is many Shia and Sunni Muslims have put aside their differences on the single focus of helping the Palestinians. And this is why they're attacking our naval vessels, which I'm against. I'm an anti-war candidate. I do not want the Houthis attacking all naval ships. But at the same time, we have to understand that that part of Yemen was in a civil war. And think about it. Now the civil war has put on hold because the civil war, the factions, the Sunni and the Shias, are working together against American interests. That should be a red alert. When you have people that have fought for centuries against each other based on religion, but are willing to stop, come together to fight us, that's a problem. So the Houthis are supported by Iran, that's evident. Nobody denies that. And it's costing us a lot of money in trade and commerce because the Suez Canal is essential. The problem in that area of the world, it's a very narrow area that could be quickly challenged. So the problem is while we might have a powerful military, unfortunately, a lot of low-tech weaponry could cause a lot of havoc on our high-tech naval ships. So yes, the Houthis are supplied by Iran because Iran has a geopolitical interest into making sure Israel doesn't get too powerful. So it's a religious factor because unfortunately, David, the problem going on in the Middle East is nothing new. It's a religious war. Don't let anybody tell you it's just a political war. It's political, it's based on land as for centuries, but of course it is religious. It is now essentially Jewish people against Muslims. And let me make myself very clear. I'm proud to have Jewish voters support me. However, there's a difference between being Jewish and Zionist. A lot of people are confused. Zionism is the political belief in Israel, okay? There's a difference. And there's Jewish people who are actually for or against the state of Israel. And I find that somewhat interesting too. But going back to your question about the Houthis, this is now a religious war. So my question, I always tell people, is it in the American best interest, economically, militarily, to be involved in a religious war where Israel says, America, we want our enemy to be your enemy? I don't know that's in the best interest of America. What is in the best interest of America and our students is world peace. That both sides deserve peace. Both sides have to stop fighting, and we have to stop spending nearly $1 trillion on a potential conflict spreading across the globe. Because right now the Middle East is a powder keg waiting to explode. And to me, it's a time bomb. It's a ticking time bomb, and we have to do everything we can as candidates, as elected officials, to defuse that time bomb by any means necessary. Because nobody will agree in the rational sense that an explosion from a bomb would be good. So let's work together, defuse it. And that's where I'm going with that.
That was my last question. Thank you, Mr. Fuji.
Okay, thank you, David. And David, let me just ask you a question. What made you get involved in politics? You're so young, because sometimes I know as I'm working with high school kids, they tell me, oh, Mr. Fuji, I want nothing to do with politics. I'm tired of it. It's a lot of yelling, fighting, a lot of mean words with the other grown-ups. What made you get involved in politics that I think is important that young men like you get involved with?
I think it started from a young age when I started to do public speaking. And then after that, I noticed kind of how I had in a way, a talent for public speaking. So I started to do speech and debate. And then in high school, 9th grade, I did Model United Nations. And I also did speech and debate. So I kind of noticed that those were kind of my passion, my strengths. So I kind of decided to that's what I'm going to focus on.
That's great,
So.
David. And David, what would you tell the young people out there in high school? Why should they start asking questions to their teachers about politics?
Because I think like in the next couple of years, like a lot of people want like younger presidents because they kind of understand our people. So I kind of believe that like the younger people, the more they get involved, because the future is going to be in their hands, like a lot of people say. So I feel like since the future is going to be in their hands, they should understand like the politics side of things, so they know like who to vote for, how to vote for, like what do they want for the future of themselves.
Yeah. So everybody, David is saying, stop being a camper. Get out there and really do the best you can and ask questions from us. Ask questions from your teachers and never stop asking questions, because that's what we're here for. Thank you, David.
Thank you.